Hello and welcome to the RISA Module 3, Part A, on Trauma-Informed Safety Assessments for Service Providers Working with Gender-Based Violence, or GBV, clients. In this module, you will learn what a trauma-informed approach is and how it can be applied in the GBV context. We will discuss some of the ways trauma can impact clients during risk assessment and safety planning sessions. And you'll learn strategies to assist clients using a trauma-informed approach. We will also briefly explain the concept of vicarious trauma and discuss how service providers can practice self-care and community care to prevent and/or address vicarious trauma. I would like to start by honoring the land that we are on, which has been the site of human activity since time immemorial. It is the traditional territories of the Huron-Wendat, Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and most recently, the Mississaugas of the Credit River First Nations. Ontario is covered by 46 treaties and other agreements and is home to many Indigenous nations from across Turtle Island, including the Inuit and the Métis. These treaties and other agreements, including the One Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, are agreements to peaceably share and care for the land and its resources. Other Indigenous nations, Europeans, and newcomers were invited into this covenant in the spirit of respect, peace, and friendship. We are mindful of broken covenants, and we strive to make this right, with the land and with each other. We are all treaty people. Many of us have come here as settlers, immigrants, newcomers, in this generation or generations past. I would like to also acknowledge those of us who came here forcibly, particularly as a result of the transatlantic slave trade. Therefore, I honor and pay tribute to the ancestors of African origin and descent. Let's start by briefly telling you a little bit about the clinic. We're a specialized clinic in downtown Toronto offering free, trauma-informed, wraparound services to women and gender-diverse people who have been subjected to violence. This includes professional counseling and transitional housing services, legal advice, representation, and court support, including family, immigration, criminal, sexual assault, and harassment law, multilingual interpretation in 200+ languages and social purpose enterprise, centralized intake and client advocacy services, including case management and special projects. We've served over 14,000 women and gender-diverse people from diverse communities last year and over 120,000 since 1985. You probably discovered this learning module through our RISA tool for service providers. RISA stands for Risk Identification and Safety Assessment. The tool was developed for frontline service providers working with survivors of GBV. We developed the tool over a 5-year national risk assessment project funded by Women and Gender Equality Canada. This involved a large-scale research project, including an extensive literature review, consultations with 597 service providers across Canada, and consultations with 38 survivors of GBV in Ontario. All of the information from this presentation and the presentations to follow comes from this research. There were many people who helped inform the tool's development, including survivors and service providers across Canada. You can learn more about the tool on our website, riseaboverisk.ca. This is the first presentation in Module 3. An intermediate module where we discuss trauma-informed and intersectional approaches to risk assessment and safety planning. This module is for experienced service providers who want to enhance their capacity for conducting risk assessments that are trauma-informed and intersectional. So ideally, this module is for folks who are already familiar with what a risk assessment is and how it's connected to safety planning with your clients. If you're not already familiar with these concepts, that is totally okay. You can check out Module 2, listed on the screen, to learn more about risk assessment and safety planning. There is also a separate series of presentations that talk about intersectional approaches to risk assessment and safety planning that you can find on our website under Module 3 of the Learning Hub. Our learning outcomes are as follows. By the end of this module, you'll be able to explain what trauma is and why a trauma-informed approach is important in the health and social services sectors. Describe the potential impacts of trauma for GBV clients and how trauma might impact a client's capacity to participate in risk assessment and safety planning. Identify strategies for implementing a trauma-informed approach when working with clients. Name and define what vicarious trauma is and strategies for practicing self-care and community care as a service provider in this field. and to know how RISA applies a trauma-informed approach to risk assessment. A gentle reminder as you go through any of our learning modules to practice self-care. Talking about GBV can be activating for some. It is also just good practice to care for ourselves during our workday, regardless of the topic. We have a list of resources on our RISA website at riseaboverisk.ca. You can look for the heart and hand symbol that's shown on the slide. Look for that on our website side menu to access resources. But in general, we encourage you to pause as often as you need to go throughout the module. Take time to move your body if it feels comfortable to do so, have a sip of water, breathe, and check in with yourself or with someone you trust when you need support. Trauma is when we've encountered an out-of-control, frightening experience that has disconnected us from all sense of resourcefulness or safety or coping or love. Another helpful definition defines trauma as follows. Trauma results from an event, series of events, or set of circumstances that is experienced by an individual as physically or emotionally harmful or threatening, and that has lasting adverse effects on the individual's functioning in physical, social, emotional, or spiritual well-being. Gender-based violence is a major cause of trauma, and it can be deeply tied to other forms of trauma, such as trauma stemming from colonialism, racism, war, or poverty. A trauma-informed approach understands and considers the pervasive nature of trauma and promotes environments of healing and recovery rather than practices and services that may inadvertently re-traumatize. The visual on the screen describes some of the key aspects of a trauma-informed approach, as found in the clinic's research. By considering the pervasive nature of trauma, a trauma-informed approach shifts the burden of the client from needing to prove they have experienced trauma. Trauma-informed services recognize and account for the effects of trauma on a client's capacity to participate in a program or service. Service provision accounts for the fact that clients may be experiencing cognitive or other effects of trauma while they're accessing our services. Trauma-informed services aim not to re-traumatize or trigger clients. The United Nations defines a survivor-centered approach to violence against women as an approach that seeks to empower the survivor by prioritizing her rights, needs, and wishes. It means ensuring that survivors have access to appropriate, accessible, and high-quality services. A survivor-centric approach means allowing clients to determine the goals and outcomes of the service provision and respecting their decisions throughout the process. It recognizes clients' agency and focuses on clients as active participants in the service provision process. In this next section, we will go over some strategies for implementing a trauma-informed and survivor-centric approach to GBV service provision. One participant in our consultations shared that service providers must use a survivor-centered approach. Service providers should spend more time listening to and validating people's experiences and help them to understand the situation and risks involved. Applying a trauma-informed and survivor-centric approach to risk assessment and safety planning for survivors of GBV means understanding how trauma and GBV impact clients' lives and behaviors. Services are created and delivered in a physically and emotionally safe environment. This provides clients with a range of choices, provides connection, and facilitates collaboration to enable clients to cope and move towards resilience. A trauma-informed approach can also foster compassion when service providers engage with clients exhibiting negative behaviors, by helping them understand that these behaviors may be maladaptive coping mechanisms that were once helpful but have since become self-destructive or harmful. Being trauma and violence informed in the GBV context means shifting the question away from what's wrong with you towards asking what happened to you. The Center for Addiction and Mental Health lists some principles for a trauma-informed approach. Clients do not need to disclose their trauma to receive trauma-informed services. The pervasiveness of trauma in society is recognized, so all services should be designed in a trauma-informed manner. Service delivery prioritizes client safety, choice, and control. Service provision is approached with a commitment to nonviolence, learning, and collaboration. Clients are supported in their physical and emotional safety. Service providers can aim to model healthy relationships and boundaries with and for clients, and service providers take steps to ensure the service provision does not re-traumatize clients. In psychiatrist Bessel van der Kolk's book, The Body Keeps the Score, Brain, Mind, and Body in the Healing of Trauma, He writes that being able to feel safe with other people is probably the single most important aspect of mental health. Safe connections are fundamental to meaningful and satisfying lives. Van der Kolk argues that trauma makes it difficult for survivors to connect with others because closeness can trigger the feeling of danger. Trauma disrupts the brain's ability to accurately read others, making survivors more likely to falsely perceive danger. The Native Women's Association of Canada also provides some strategies for a trauma-informed approach. Obtain informed consent to proceed in relational work with the client. Acknowledge the harmful impacts of structural and interpersonal biases and stereotypes of survivors. Actively challenge the inequities resulting from those biases and stereotypes. Recognize and screen for social withdrawal and substance abuse. Provide services that focus on the client's strengths and support the client in their ability to set and achieve goals. Differentiate bad behavior from trauma responses or symptoms and understand the client's coping strategies. Meet clients where they are and provide them with the choice in their healing. Use harm-reducing, affirming, and first-person language, and ask how services can help alleviate trauma symptoms. Trauma can affect survivors' physical and psychological states. By helping clients emotionally regulate, service providers can ensure clients are equipped to access services and participate in their own healing effectively. Clients may exhibit symptoms of being hypo or hyper-aroused. This means clients may be experiencing a heightened state of activation or energy, or in an under-aroused state. If hypo or hyper-aroused, clients are outside the optimal zone of functioning, meaning they cannot effectively cope with their emotions. Some symptoms of hyperarousal are angry outbursts, fear, anxiety, and panic. Some symptoms of hypoarousal are depression, numbness, emptiness, and the inability to speak. Somatic or body-based approaches can help clients emotionally regulate. Some somatic techniques include taking a break and suggesting the client go for a walk or get a cup of tea or a glass of water. The following techniques can also be helpful. Ask your client to describe 3 things in full detail. For example, what are 3 things that you like to look at in my office? Orient your client to the present time and place by explicitly labeling cues of safety. For example, you're in my office, it's X date, you're with me, you're safe. If your client is experiencing hyperarousal, try using diaphragmatic breathing. Ask your client to take deep belly breaths or help them breathe deeply by breathing with them. Ask the client to notice their feet on the ground afterwards and look around the room. Vicarious trauma has been defined as the emotional residue of exposure to traumatic stories and experiences of others through work. This involves witnessing the fear, pain, and terror that others have experienced. It is sometimes called compassion fatigue or secondary traumatization, though it is not the same thing as burnout. Some common signs of vicarious trauma include feeling lingering anger, rage, and sadness about clients' victimization, becoming overly involved and emotional with clients, loss of hope, pessimism, and cynicism, distancing, numbing, and detachment, and difficulty maintaining professional boundaries with clients. Organizations can take steps to help their workers prevent and/or manage vicarious trauma in the workplace. Individual service providers can also take steps. For example, take care of yourself emotionally by engaging in relaxing and self-soothing activities. Look after your physical and mental well-being. Maintain a healthy work-life balance and have interests outside of work. Be realistic about what you can accomplish, avoiding wishful thinking. Take regular breaks and time off when needed. Seek social support from colleagues, friends, and family. Use a buddy system in providing care to traumatized clients. The City of Toronto has also created a Vicarious Trauma Toolkit, which provides helpful strategies for managing vicarious trauma. The link will be in the video's description. Now we will go over some ways in which the RISA tool applies a trauma-informed approach. The Start Assessment page on the RISA website reminds you to prepare your client before the assessment begins. This includes explaining the goal of the assessment, the client's rights to confidentiality, and encourages the provider to check in and take breaks using the self-care resources on the RISA website. The self-care resources can be used by just the provider or with the client as well. This is a great place to go if you or your client are feeling activated during or outside of the assessment. The RISA questionnaire has been designed with a trauma-informed approach in mind. The Before You Start section of the questionnaire reminds providers how trauma may impact their client's ability to participate in the assessment and how they can meet the client's needs by taking breaks and checking in. The suggested script and prompts also introduce the client to the questions they are going to be asked, so they aren't caught off guard by potentially activating questions. The script also reassures the client that they are in control of the conversation. They do not have to disclose anything they don't feel comfortable disclosing, and that they can pause for self-care whenever is needed. It also includes check-ins throughout the questionnaire. Please note that the script is meant to be a guide rather than something to follow word for word. A trauma-informed approach to risk assessment involves making the questionnaire more of a conversation rather than an interview. To ensure this, it is important to adapt the script based on the direction of the conversation and make it your own. Please keep in mind that you as the provider should use your professional judgment and be attuned to your client's reactions throughout the assessment. Your client may bring up information that you want to follow up on, or that inspires additional questions outside of the assessment. We encourage you to follow the organic flow of the conversation and to use the additional notes/comments box underneath each question to note down any additional information that may be relevant to your client's case. Even if the questionnaire does not include a check-in or break, but your client is exhibiting signs of being activated, use your professional judgment to check in, take a break, or stop the questionnaire. To conclude, service providers must employ a survivor-centric and trauma-informed approach when working with survivors of gender-based violence. Some aspects of a trauma-informed approach include prioritizing the client's safety, choice, and control, supporting clients' physical and emotional safety, modeling healthy relationships and boundaries, obtaining informed consent, focusing on clients' strengths and goals, and meeting clients where they are at. Another important part of adopting a trauma-informed approach includes helping clients emotionally regulate when they exhibit symptoms of being hypo or hyper-aroused. It is also important to take care of yourself throughout this process by engaging in self-care. If you would like to test your knowledge from this presentation, we've created a short downloadable quiz and an accompanying answer key. Please click the link in the video description to download the quiz. Thank you so much for taking the time to complete Trauma-Informed Approaches, the first presentation in Module 3. Thank you for the life-changing work that you do and for going out of your way to learn about risk assessment and incorporating it into your work. Make sure to check out the video description for links to additional resources and the work cited in the module.